Hello friends, and welcome back. I hope this video finds you having a peaceful day. Before we begin, I want to ask you a question. It is a quiet question, one that perhaps you have whispered to yourself in the middle of the night when sleep refuses to come. Have you ever loved someone so much that you forgot to leave some love for yourself? We are taught from a very young age, especially those of us from a certain generation, that family is everything. We are taught that sacrifice is the highest form of love. We are told that if we just give a little more, if we are just a little more patient, a little more successful, a little more helpful, then eventually we will be seen. We will be appreciated. But there's a hard truth that we often only learn when we are older. It is a truth that leaves scars. Sometimes, the more you give, the less they respect you. And sometimes, the people you would cross oceans for wouldn't even cross the street for you. My name is Myra Whitmore. If you looked at my resume, you would see a woman who has it all together. I am 34 years old. I am a cardiology resident, which means I spend my days and nights fixing broken hearts. I am also a single mother to the beautiful 3-year-old twins, Lily and Lucas. I build a life on being the strong one, the reliable one, the practical one. But 2 months ago, that life shattered. It didn't happen in a courtroom or a bank. It happened in the sterile, cold air of an emergency room, under lights that were too bright, with the smell of antiseptic burning my nose. I was lying on a gurney. I was bleeding internally. Earlier that evening, a truck had run a red light. I was just driving home. I was tired, thinking about making dinner, thinking about the laundry pile waiting for me. And then, metal screamed against metal, glass exploded, and my world went dark. When I woke up in that ambulance, and later in the trauma bay, the pain was not the first thing I felt. The fear was. Not fear for my life, though that was hanging by a thread. I felt the terrifying, cold fear of a mother who realizes she is the only thing standing between her children and the world. The doctors were moving fast. I could hear words like ruptured spleen and immediate surgery. I grabbed the arm of a colleague, Dr. Marcus Smith. I begged him for his phone because mine was smashed. The screen a spiderweb of cracks and blood. I had 45 minutes. 45 minutes before the babysitter had to leave. 45 minutes before my children would be alone. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely type the number. It was the number I had memorized before I knew my own birthday. My parents, I called them. I needed anyone to just go sit with Lily and Lucas, just for a few hours. Just until I was out of surgery. I thought, this is it. This is what family is for. This is the moment where all the petty differences, all the history, all the awkwardness falls away, and they show up, but they didn't answer the call. Instead, a few minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was a notification from our family group chat. I want you to really hear these words. I want you to imagine lying in a hospital bed, cold, terrified, and reading this from the woman who gave birth to you. The text read, Myra, you have always been a nuisance and a burden. We have Taylor Swift tickets with Vanessa tonight. We have been planning this for months. Figure it out yourself. Figure it out yourself. I stared at those words until they blurred. A nuisance, a burden. I was about to go into surgery that I might not wake up from, and my mother was worried about a concert. My father texted right after, telling me not to be dramatic. My sister, Vanessa, she simply sent a laughing emoji. In that moment, something inside me broke. And it wasn't a bone. It was the tether I had been holding onto for 34 years. The tether that bound me to them. The hope that if I was just good enough, they would love me. I did figure it out. From that hospital bed, hooked up to IVs, I hired a professional emergency nanny service. I paid them triple the rate. I drained my savings to ensure strangers would keep my children safe, because my own blood refused to. And then, as the anesthesia began to take hold, I made a decision that felt heavier than the car that had hit me. I was done. No more mortgage payments, no more health insurance, No more car repairs. No more being the bank account that they treated like a nuisance. For 8 years, I had been quietly paying for their entire lives, and they called me a burden. 2 weeks after that surgery, there was a knock on my door. But before we get to who was standing there and the storm that was about to rain down on my family, I need to take you back, to understand why I sent them money for 8 years. To understand why I let them treat me this way. You have to understand the house I grew up in. You have to understand the Carver household. Growing up, I learned a very quiet lesson. Love was not a right. It was a reward. And in our house, there was a ranking system. My older sister, Vanessa, was the son. Everything revolved around her. She was 3 years older than me, effortlessly beautiful, with that kind of magnetic charm that makes people want to lean in. When Vanessa walked into a room, my parents lit up. It was automatic, like a reflex. When Vanessa announced she wanted to pursue fashion design, my mother cried tears of joy. She talked about it for weeks. My father called her our little visionary. They saw her as an artist, a star waiting to rise. Then there was me. When I told them I wanted to be a doctor, to save lives, to study the human heart, my father just nodded. He didn't look up from his newspaper. He just said, "That's practical, practical." That was my label. Vanessa was the visionary. Myra was the practical one. Vanessa was the dream. Myra was the insurance policy. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself that I didn't need the applause. I buried myself in textbooks. I studied while Vanessa went to parties. I worked double shifts while Vanessa went on shopping trips. I clawed my way into one of the top medical schools in the country. I thought, when I graduate, then they will see. When I become a doctor, then they will look at me the way they look at her. The day I graduated from medical school should have been the proudest moment of my life. I walked across that stage, the weight of 4 years of sleepless nights lifting off my shoulders. I scanned the crowd, looking for them, looking for my parents. They weren't there. They arrived 2 hours late. The ceremony was over. The auditorium was emptying out. "Sorry, sweetheart," my mom said. She was checking her reflection in a compact mirror, not quite meeting my eyes. Vanessa had an emergency meeting with a potential investor. We had to drop her off first. You know how anxious she gets. There were no flowers. There was no celebration dinner at a nice restaurant. There was just a quick photo taken in the parking lot, next to their car, before they rushed off because Vanessa needed emotional support after her meeting. I have that photo still. In it, I am holding my diploma, forcing a smile that doesn't reach my eyes. My parents are looking off camera, distracted, already leaving before they had even really arrived. Compare that to Vanessa's first fashion show 3 years earlier. The whole family flew to New York. They stayed in a 5-star hotel. They sat in the front row. My father posted 17 photos on Facebook with captions like, "So proud of our talented girl." For my graduation, I got a parking lot photo and a lukewarm, "Congrats, honey." I swallowed the hurt. I pushed it down deep, where I kept all the other hurts. I told myself it made sense. Fashion is competitive, right? Vanessa needed more support. Medicine is stable. I was strong. I could handle things on my own. That was the lie I told myself. That was the narrative I accepted. But what I didn't know then, what I wouldn't let myself see, was that my parents' favoritism wasn't just emotional. It wasn't just about attention or praise. It was financial. And I was about to become the one footing the bill for their favoritism. It started 8 years ago, right after I finished medical school and started my residency. I was drowning in student loans, working 80-hour weeks, barely sleeping. My father called me one evening. His voice was tight, sounding embarrassed. "Myra," he said, "we're in a bit of a bind. The mortgage payment is due, and things are just tight this month. Could you help us out? Just this once. Just this once." Those 3 words are the most dangerous words in the English language. I transferred $2,000 for $100 that night. I didn't hesitate. They were my parents. They had raised me. Of course, I would help. But just this once became the next month, and the month after that. And then it wasn't just the mortgage. It was their health insurance premiums, $800 a month, because my dad's company had changed their coverage. Then it was the emergencies, the car repairs, the roof leak, the new furnace. I never said no, not once, even when I got pregnant with the twins, even when their father walked out on me during my 5th month, leaving me alone and scared. I kept paying. I remember calling my parents from the hospital when I had a bleeding scare during the pregnancy. I was terrified. I was desperate for my mother. Oh, honey, Mom said, we wish we could come, but Vanessa is so stressed after her show in Milan. She really needs us right now. They didn't come, not for the birth, not for the first month when I was nursing to newborns and studying for my board exams, but the automatic transfers. They kept going out. $2,400 for the mortgage, $800 for insurance, whatever else they asked for. I kept a spreadsheet. I don't know why I did it. Maybe some part of me, the scientist in me, needed to see the data. Maybe I needed to see it in black and white to believe it was happening. The numbers were staggering. Over 8 years, I had sent them over $320,000. I never asked for gratitude. I never expected a parade. I just wanted to be a good daughter. But I also never expected to be called a burden by the very people I had been carrying on my back for a decade. The reckoning was coming, and it all started with that text message in the emergency room, and the knock on the door 2 weeks later. That was the beginning of the end. Welcome back to the story. If you are just joining us, we are walking through a journey of betrayal, realization, and the difficult road to self-respect. There's a quiet truth about cutting ties with toxic family members that people rarely talk about. We expect it to feel like a battle. We expect screaming matches and explosions, but often the immediate aftermath is just silence. And in that silence, you start to hear your own thoughts clearly for the first time in years. I spent 5 days in the hospital after my surgery, 5 days of for drips, the haze of morphine, and nurses checking my vitals every few hours. In those 5 days, my phone did not ring, not once. There was no text asking if I was alive, no voicemail asking about the twins. My parents and my sister had Taylor Swift tickets. Remember, they were busy living the life I was financing, while I was trying to figure out how to stand up without fainting. The emergency nanny service was expensive, worth every single penny. But expensive. They coordinated with my regular sitter, kept Lily and Lucas safe and fed, and sent me daily photo updates. Strangers, complete strangers, took better care of my most precious treasures than my own blood did. On day 3 of my hospital stay, I asked the nurse for my laptop. She looked at me with concern. She said, "You should be resting, Myra." I told her I needed to rest, yes. But first, I needed to stop carrying a weight that was crushing me. My hands were steady as I logged into my banking app. 8 years of automatic transfers stared back at me, regular as clockwork. $2,400 on the 1st of every month, $800 on the 15th. I canceled them all. Then, I opened my phone settings. I blocked my father's number. I blocked my mother's number. I blocked Vanessa. There was no dramatic moment. There were no tears. I didn't write a long letter explaining why. It felt like setting down a heavy bag of groceries after walking up 3 flights of stairs. I just set it down. Dr. Marcus Smith, the colleague who had lent me his phone in the ambulance, stopped by later that afternoon. He had checked on me every day, bringing coffee and quiet company. "How are you feeling?" he asked. I looked up at him, and for the first time in 8 years, I told the absolute truth. I said, "Better." For the first time in a decade, I actually feel better. He didn't push for details. He just nodded like he understood. I knew the fallout was coming. I knew my parents would notice the missing money. They would rage. They would cry. They would demand explanations. But I didn't expect what came next. 2 weeks after my surgery, I was finally home. I was moving slowly, holding a pillow against my abdomen when I coughed. but I was home. It was a Saturday morning. I was making pancakes for Lily and Lucas, their favorite weekend treat. The kitchen smelled like butter and maple syrup. It was a domestic, peaceful scene. Lucas was trying to stack his tie blocks on the floor. Lily was helping by knocking them down and giggling. Then came the knock. 3 sharp, authoritative raps on my front door. I froze. I wiped my hands on a dish towel, my heart rate spiking. The peace shattered instantly. If it was my parents, I wasn't ready. I didn't know if I would ever be ready to look them in the face again. I walked to the door slowly, protecting my incision. I looked through the peephole, and my breath caught in my throat. It wasn't my parents. Standing on my doorstep was a tall man in his 70s. He had silver hair, neatly combed, and sharp blue eyes that I remembered from my childhood. He stood with a posture that still carried the authority of 40 years on the federal bench. It was Grandpa Thomas, my father's father. I hadn't seen him in almost 3 years. My parents always had excuses for why we couldn't visit him. They said he was too busy, or he lived too far away, or it was just inconvenient. I realized later they probably just didn't want him asking questions about their finances. I opened the door. He didn't say a word at first. He just looked at me. Then he pulled me into a hug so tight it made my surgical incision ache. But I didn't care, Myra, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Let me look at you. He pulled back, his eyes scanning my face, seeing the fatigue, the pallor. His eyes dropped to where my hand rested protectively over my stomach. I know everything, he said quietly. Eleanor told me, and Eleanor, my mother's younger sister, the black sheep, the only person in the family who had ever openly questioned how my parents treated me. Of course, she had called him Grandpa. I started to speak, but I didn't know what to say. I felt ashamed. Somehow, ashamed that he knew how little I meant to them. He held up a hand. You don't need to explain anything, Myra. Not a single word. But I do need you to come somewhere with me. He walked into the house, looking around at the modest living room, the toys scattered on the floor. He smiled at the twins, Lily and Lucas, who usually were shy with strangers, took to him immediately. Maybe they sensed that he was safe. Maybe blood calls to blood in the good ways, too. Grandpa Thomas sat at my kitchen table, watching them play. They look just like you did at that age, he said softly. Same stubborn chin. I sat down to cups of coffee and took the seat across from him. My hands were trembling slightly. Grandpa, how much do you know? I asked. He wrapped his hands round the warm mug. Eleanor called me the night of the accident. She had heard through one of your cousins that you were in surgery. When she told me what your parents did, when she told me about the text message, he stopped. His jaw tightened. I saw the flash of the judge in his eyes, the man who had sentenced criminals. I have watched this for years, Myra, he said. The way Richard and Helen treat you versus Vanessa. I am old, but I am not blind. I stayed away because I didn't want to cause friction in your life. I thought I was keeping the peace. I was wrong. I stared into my coffee cup. I thought maybe I was imagining it. I whispered. I thought maybe I was just being sensitive. You weren't, he said firmly. I was a federal judge for 40 years, Myra. I know how to read people. I know what favoritism looks like, and I know what exploitation looks like. He leaned forward, his blue eyes locking onto mine. Tell me something. Do you still have records of the money you have sent them? I nodded slowly. I have a spreadsheet. Every transfer, every date, for 8 years. Good, he said. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. It was cream-colored, thick, expensive paper. I want you to put together a summary of those records, he said. Every payment, every dollar. Why? I asked. He slid the envelope across the table to me. Because next Saturday is my 70th birthday party, he said. The whole family will be there. Your parents, Vanessa, everyone. I opened the envelope. It was a formal invitation. I intend for the truth to come out, Myra. His voice was calm. But it was the calm before a hurricane. Not as an attack, he said. Not as revenge, simply as facts, and facts, as I learned in 40 years on the bench, have a way of speaking for themselves. My stomach churned. The idea of facing them, of exposing the dirty laundry in front of aunts, uncles, cousins. It was terrifying. What if they hate me? I asked, what if the family takes their side? He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. His skin was dry and paper thin, but his grip was strong. The ones who matter won't hate you, he said, and the ones who do never deserved you in the first place. I looked at the invitation. Then I looked at my children playing on the floor. I thought about the text message. I thought about the Taylor Swift concert. I thought about the $320,000. Okay, I said. I'll do it. Grandpa Thomas smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was a grim smile. Good. Bring the folder. The next 2 weeks were a blur. I went back to work on light duty. I took care of the twins. And every night, after they were asleep, I worked on the folder. I printed every bank statement. I highlighted every transfer. I organized them chronologically. Looking at it all together was physically sickening. Month after month, year after year, a river of money flowing in one direction. Mortgage, insurance, emergency repairs. It totaled $364,200. I sat there in the glow of my laptop screen, realizing that I had bought them a house. I had bought them security, and in return, they had left me to bleed. And Eleanor came over 3 days before the party. She was 55, sharp-tongued, and had always been the outcast because she refused to pretend that everything was perfect. She flipped through the folder I had prepared. Her expression darkened with each page. $360,000. She said flatly, Myra, do you understand what this is? This is theft. It's emotional theft. I know, I said. She set down the folder. They built their comfortable life on your silence. Myra, they bank on the fact that you were too good to say anything. You are not obligated to keep giving them that silence. I nodded. Though my anxiety was eating me alive, that evening, I got a text from a cousin I barely spoke to. Heard you and your parents had a falling out. The text read, Vanessa has been telling everyone you've been acting erratic since your accident. Just wanted to give you a heads up. I stared at the message. They were already spinning the narrative. They were painting me as unstable. They were preparing their defense before I even arrived. I hadn't wanted a fight, but it seemed they were bringing one to me anyway. Saturday arrived. The sky was gray and heavy. I dressed Lily and Lucas in their best clothes. I put on a simple navy dress, professional, understated. I wasn't going there to make a scene. I was going there to stand my ground. I put the manila folder in my bag. We drove to Grandpa Thomas's estate. It was a large colonial house on 3 acres of manicured land, white columns, wraparound porch, the kind of place that whispered of old money and generations of secrets. More than 40 cars lined the circular driveway. The whole family was there. I pulled up, my hands tight on the steering wheel. I took a deep breath. Ready? I whispered to the twins. Ready? Lucas shouted, oblivious to the war zone we were about to enter. I walked up the steps, holding my children's hands. I could hear the music inside. I could hear the laughter. I opened the door and stepped in. And the first thing I saw was my mother. She was standing near the fireplace, holding a glass of champagne, laughing at something someone had said. She looked happy, carefree. Then she turned. She saw me. Her smile died. The room seemed to tilt. There is a specific kind of loneliness that only happens in a crowded room of people who share your last name. It is a cold, hollow feeling. You look around at faces that hold pieces of your own reflection, the same nose, the same eyes, and yet you feel like a ghost. I stood in the entryway of my grandfather's home. The air smelled of expensive perfume, beeswax candles, and roasting meat. A string quartet was playing something light and airy in the corner. It was a perfect scene, a perfect family gathering. But beneath the music, I could hear the silence that had fallen over the group near the fireplace. My mother stared at me. Her glass of champagne was frozen halfway to her mouth. For a heartbeat, I saw genuine shock on her face. She hadn't expected me to come. She thought I was broken. She thought I was hiding in my apartment, ashamed of my erratic behavior. She didn't know I was done hiding. Then, the shock was replaced by something else. A mask. She put on a tight, polite smile and turned back to the woman she was speaking with. She dismissed me, just like that. But Vanessa couldn't let it go. My sister glided over to me. She was wearing a silver designer dress that shimmered under the chandelier lights. I did a quick mental calculation. That dress probably cost more than my monthly student loan payment. And I knew, with a sinking feeling in my gut, who had likely paid for it. Her smile was perfect. Her eyes were ice. "Oh, Myra," she said, leaning into air, kiss my cheek. She didn't actually touch me. "You made it. We heard about your accident. Nothing too serious, I hope." I shifted Lucas to my other hip. I met her gaze steadily. A ruptured spleen and massive internal bleeding. "Vanessa," I said quietly, "I almost died." Her smile flickered. "Just for a fraction of a second. Mom said it was just a fender bender," she said, her voice breezy. "She said you were being a bit dramatic about it." "Mom wasn't there," I said. "None of you were." Vanessa's expression hardened. She patted my arm with full sympathy. It was a patronizing pat, the kind you give a child who doesn't understand the grown-up world. "Well," she said, "you look fine now. That's what matters, isn't it? Try to have a good time, Myra. Don't make a scene. Grandpa is old. Let's not upset him." She drifted away, trailing the scent of lilies and entitlement. I felt the first rumble of thunder in my chest. Don't make a scene. That had been the motto of my entire life. Keep the peace. Pay the bills. Don't complain. I walked further into the room. I felt eyes on me, pitying looks, whispered concerns. I made my way to the refreshment table to get some fruit punch for the twins. That's when I heard it. Vanessa's voice, deliberately loud, carrying across the room to a cluster of aunts and cousins near the dessert table. "I'm so worried about Myra. Honestly," she was saying. She sounded heartbroken. The accident really affected her head. She's been saying the strangest things. She cut off all contact with Mom and Dad for no reason. I kept my back turned. I poured the punch. My hand was shaking, but I forced it to be still. My mother joined in. I heard her sniffle. "We've tried everything," Mom said. "Calls, texts. She won't respond. I think she's having some kind of breakdown. You know how hard residency is, and raising those twins alone. It's just too much for her. Poor thing," someone murmured. "She's always been the sensitive one," Vanessa added. "Remember how dramatic she was as a teenager? I think she just snapped. We're trying to get her help, but she's pushing us away." I stood there, frozen. They were rewriting reality in real time. They were taking my silence, the silence I needed to heal, and turning it into a symptom of insanity. They were taking my boundaries and calling them a breakdown. It was brilliant, really. If they painted me as crazy before I could open my mouth, then anything I said later would just sound like the ravings of a sick woman. And Eleanor appeared at my side. Her face was tight with fury. "You hear that?" she whispered. "I hear it," I said. "They've been laying the groundwork all week," Eleanor said. "Calling relatives, planting seeds. They know something is coming, Myra. They're trying to discredit you before you can speak." I looked across the room. My grandfather. He was sitting in his large leather armchair, holding a glass of whiskey. He wasn't talking to anyone. He was watching. He was watching Vanessa spin her lies. He was watching my mother play the victim, and he was watching me. He gave me the smallest nod. "I'm fine, Eleanor," I said. "Let them talk. They are digging their own graves, okay?" I want to pause here for a second before Grandpa reveals what he knows. I want to ask you something. Have you ever been in a situation where someone tried to rewrite the truth about you? Where they painted you as the crazy one just because you finally stood up for yourself? It is a terrible feeling. It makes you question your own sanity. It makes you want to scream. If you have been there, drop a comment below. Just type truth. I want you to know you aren't alone. Now, back to the party. The room quieted suddenly. Someone clanked a spoon against a crystal glass. The sharp sound cut through the chatter. Grandpa Thomas rose from his chair. At 70, he moved a little slower than he used to, but he still commanded the room. He walked to the center of the rug. Every eye turned to him. "Before we continue with the festivities," he said, his voice carrying effortlessly without a microphone, "I have a few things I'd like to say." The air in the room changed. It grew heavy. My father, Richard, stepped forward quickly. He looked nervous. He smoothed his tie. "Dad, wait," my father said. His voice was controlled, jovial, but I could see the sweat on his forehead. "Before you give your toast, there is something the family should know." Grandpa raised a single eyebrow. "Richard," my father turned to face the room. He put his arm round my mother. They looked like the perfect couple, the pillars of the community. "As many of you may have heard," Dad began, his voice dropping to a sad, serious tone, "my daughter Myra has been going through a difficult time." He gestured toward me, a gesture of pity. "After her accident, she's been confused, distant," Dad said. "She has cut off contact with her mother and me completely. It has been heartbreaking for us." My mother dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief. "We have only ever wanted the best for her," she sobbed softly, "but she has been spreading terrible lies about us, saying we abandon her, that we don't love her." The room was silent. I felt 40 pairs of eyes boring into me, judging me. "We've tried to be patient," Dad continued, "but we just want everyone to know. We love her. We forgive her. We just want our daughter back. We gave that girl everything," Vanessa added from the side, "everything. And now she claims we refused to help her during her accident. It is absolutely not true. There must be some kind of misunderstanding in her memory." Someone near me let out a sympathetic murmur. "The poor parents. Look how much they care." I stood there, clutching my children's hands so hard my knuckles were white. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But then, Grandpa Thomas's voice cut through the room like a gavel. "Are you finished, Richard?" The question was quiet, mild, even, but every person in that room heard the steel underneath it. Dad's confident expression faltered. I just thought the family should know the context." "Dad, the family should know the truth," Grandpa interrupted, "and I intend to give it to them." Grandpa Thomas walked closer to my father. He didn't look like a fragile old man anymore. He looked like the judge who had put away corrupt politicians and violent criminals. "I have listened to your concerns, Richard," he said. "Helen, Vanessa, you have painted a very clear picture of a troubled young woman who has turned against her loving family." He paused. He looked around the room, making eye contact with the aunts and uncles. "Now," Grandpa said, "I would like to ask some questions." Dad shifted uncomfortably. "Dad, I don't think this is the place." "This is exactly the place," Grandpa said. "This is family, and families should know the truth about each other." He turned to my father. "Richard, a simple question. Who has been paying the mortgage on your house for the past 8 years?" The color drained from Dad's face. It happened instantly. One moment he was flushed with performance. The next he was ashen. "What?" Dad stammered. "Your mortgage," Grandpa repeated clearly. $2,400 a month for 96 months. "Who has been paying it?" Dad's eyes darted to Mom. Mom looked terrified. We pay our own mortgage." "Of course," Dad lied. "Do you?" Grandpa reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out the folder. "My folder." "Because I have here," Grandpa said, lifting the manila folder for everyone to see, "a complete record of bank transfers from Mira's account to your mortgage company every month for 8 years. A murmur rippled through the room. People were leaning in. The poor parents' narrative was beginning to crack. That's a misunderstanding," Mom stammered. Myra offered. "We never asked." "I am not suggesting you held a gun to her head," Grandpa said calmly. "I am simply establishing facts." He opened the folder. "Let me share some numbers with the family," he said. "I think they will find them illuminating." Across the room, Vanessa had gone pale. Dad's hands were clenched at his sides. Mom looked like she might faint. And I stood there, holding my children, my heart pounding in my throat. As the truth finally began to breathe. There is a saying that numbers do not lie. People lie. They lie to save face. They lie to protect their image. They lie to themselves to sleep at night. But numbers are cold. They are rigid. And in that living room, under the crystal chandelier, the numbers were about to scream. Grandpa Thomas stood in the center of the room. He adjusted his reading glasses. It was a simple movement, but it commanded absolute silence. Even the waiters had stopped moving. He opened the manila folder. The sound of the paper turning was the only noise in the room. 8 years. Grandpa Thomas read. His voice was steady, lacking any theatrical drama, which made it all the more terrifying. Let us break down exactly what support looks like in this family. He looked up at my father, then back at the page. Mortgage payments. He read, $230,000 for $100. He paused. He let that number hang in the air like smoke. That is the house Richard and Helen live in, Grandpa said, looking around the room at the cousins and aunts. The house they claim they pay for themselves. Myra paid for it. I heard a gasp from the back of the room. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." My father opened his mouth to speak, but Grandpa cut him off with a single raised finger. Health insurance premiums, Grandpa continued, $76,800. He looked at my mother. When Richard's company dropped their coverage, Myra picked up the bill every single month for 8 years. He flipped a page. The sound was sharp. Car repairs, home maintenance, a new furnace, a new roof, emergency expenses. He read the figure, approximately $45,000. Another page, cash gifts, loans that were never repaid, financial support for Vanessa's fashion ventures. Vanessa flinched. She actually took a step back, as if the words were physical blows. $12,000, Grandpa read. He closed the folder. He took off his glasses and looked at my parents. Total, he said, $364,200. Give or take a few pennies. The silence in the room was deafening. It was a heavy, suffocating silence. $364,000. And Eleanor stepped forward from the side of the room. She looked at the stunned faces of our relatives. For context, everyone, Eleanor said, her voice cutting through the shock. That is more than most people make in 7 years of full-time work. That is a retirement fund. That is a college education for 3 children. And Myra did this while completing her medical residency. She did this while raising infant twins alone. My mother was shaking. Her face was a mask of panic. She offered. Mom's voice cracked, high and thin. We never forced her. We didn't know it was a burden. She never said anything. No one said you forced her. Helen, Grandpa replied. His voice remained frighteningly calm. But I am curious about something. He took a step toward them. In 8 years of receiving this support, how many times did you say thank you? My parents said nothing. They stared at the floor. How many times did you write her a card? Grandpa asked. How many times did you invite her over for dinner not to ask for a check, but just to feed her? Still nothing. How many times did you visit her in the hospital after her twins were born? My mother started crying, but these weren't the delicate, sympathetic tears from earlier. These were ugly, panicked sobs, the tears of someone who has been caught. We thought she was fine, Dad shouted. His voice was hollow, desperate. She never complained. She always managed. She is a doctor, for God's sake. She makes good money. She managed, Grandpa repeated. Because she had to. Because you taught her that her needs didn't matter. You taught her that her only value to this family was her utility. An uncle near the back, Uncle Frank, shook his head. He looked at my father with a mixture of disbelief and disgust. Jesus, Richard, Frank said, $360,000. And you called her a burden? Dad flinched like he had been struck. I didn't mean it like that, Dad mumbled. It was just, in the heat of the moment, Grandpa mused. That brings us to the next point. Grandpa turned back to the room. The atmosphere had shifted completely. 10 minutes ago, the room had been looking at me with pity, thinking I was the unstable daughter. Now, they were looking at my parents with horror. But Grandpa wasn't finished. The money was bad. The money was theft. But what came next? That was the cruelty. There is one more thing the family should hear, Grandpa said. He reached into his pocket again. This time, he didn't pull out a folder. He pulled out his phone. 2 months ago, he said, Myra was in a car accident. A serious one. A truck ran a red light. She was bleeding internally. She was being rushed to emergency surgery. He paused, letting the gravity of the situation sink in. From the ambulance, she called her parents. Her children were home with a babysitter who was about to leave. She needed anyone to watch them for a few hours while doctors tried to save her life. He looked directly at my parents. They looked small now, shrinking. This is the text message she received in response, Grandpa said. From Helen. He cleared his throat. He held the phone up, reading from the screenshot Dr. Marcus had taken for me. I will read it exactly, Grandpa said. Myra, you have always been a nuisance and a burden. We have Taylor Swift tickets with Vanessa tonight. We have been planning this for months. Figure it out yourself. The reaction was instant. Oh my God. Someone breathed. That can't be real. A cousin whispered. Vanessa stepped forward, her hands raised. You are taking it out of context. She cried out. It was a joke. We didn't know she was actually hurt. There is no context. Vanessa and Eleanor snapped from beside me. There is no context that makes abandoning your daughter during a medical emergency acceptable. We didn't know it was serious. Dad shouted, his face red. She's a doctor. She's always round hospitals. We thought she was just being dramatic. Did you ask? Grandpa's voice was like a whip crack. Did you call her back to check? Grandpa asked. Did you drive to the hospital just in case? Did you text the next day or the day after that? Silence. The answer, Grandpa said, for those wondering, is no, no, and no. A woman I recognized as a distant cousin stepped away from my parents. She physically took 2 steps back, her face twisted in disgust. Several others followed. My parents were suddenly standing on an island in the middle of the room. My mother was sobbing uncontrollably now. I didn't mean it. I was frustrated. You didn't think your daughter might die, Grandpa finished, because you never thought about her at all. He turned to face the room. He looked tired. The fire that had driven him seemed to dim slightly, replaced by a deep, profound sadness. I am not asking anyone to pass judgment, he said softly. I am simply presenting facts. What you do with them is your own choice. He looked at me finally. His eyes were soft. Myra, he said, is there anything you would like to say? I hadn't planned to speak. I had come here expecting Grandpa to handle everything. I had wanted to hide behind him, to let the facts speak for themselves, while I stood silently in vindication. But looking around the room, looking at my crying mother, my shell-shocked father, my sister's crumbling facade, I realized I had something to say after all. I handed Lucas to Aunt Eleanor. I smoothed my dress, and I stepped forward into the center of the circle. There is a moment in every person's life where you have to choose between keeping the peace and telling the truth. Usually, we choose the peace. We swallow the words, we smile. We say it's okay when it is not okay. We do this because we are afraid that if we speak, we will lose everything. But standing in that room, looking at the people who had taken so much from me, I realized something. I had nothing left to lose. They had already taken my money. They had taken my self-esteem. And when I was bleeding in an ambulance, they had taken away the illusion that they cared. So I stepped forward. The room was so quiet you could hear the ice melting in the glasses. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic rhythm. But my voice surprised me. It was steady. I didn't come here for revenge, I said. I looked at my father first, then my mother. I didn't come here to humiliate you. My father looked at me, his eyes pleading. He wanted me to stop. He wanted me to smooth it over, to make a joke, to fix it like I always fixed everything. I continued. I came here because Grandpa invited me, and because for 34 years, I have been living with a version of this family that wasn't real. I took a breath. The air felt thin. I lived in a version where I was the strong one, I said. I was the reliable one, the practical one, the one who didn't need anything. I looked at Vanessa. She was staring at her shoes, unable to meet my gaze. I believed you, I said to her, when you said you needed more support because your industry was harder. I believed you. When Mom and Dad said I could handle things on my own because I was smart and capable, I believed them. I wore that independence like a badge of honor. I thought it meant you respected me. A tear slid down my cheek. I didn't wipe it away. I let them see it. But that night in the ambulance, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that carried across the room, fleeting and terrified, wondering if my children would grow up orphans. I finally understood. I looked directly at my mother. I wasn't strong to you. I was convenient. I wasn't reliable. I was the exploitable. And no matter how much I gave, no matter how many checks I wrote, no matter how many crises I solved, it would never be enough to make you see me the way you see her. I gestured to Vanessa. Several family members moved closer to me. An aunt touched my arm gently. A cousin nodded, tears in his eyes. They were seeing the dynamic clearly for the first time. My father started to speak. He stepped forward, his hands out. Myra, we love you. You know we love you. I held up a hand. I'm not finished. He stopped. He looked like a man who had lost his map. I don't hate you. I said quietly, I really don't. But I can't keep pretending this is okay. I can't keep buying love that should have been free. An uncle across the room, Uncle Frank, again turned to my father. How could you, Richard? He asked, his voice full of disappointment. This whole time, you have been living off your daughter while treating her like nothing. The room was turning. I could feel the shift. It was a physical sensation, like the tide going out. The sympathy for my parents had evaporated, replaced by our cold, hard judgment. So what now? Dad's voice rose, desperate and angry. You have humiliated us in front of the whole family. Are you happy? Myra, is this what you wanted? To ruin us? I shook my head slowly. I am not happy. Dad, I said, none of this makes me happy. This is a tragedy. I looked at him with profound sadness. But I am also not sorry, because this isn't about humiliation. It is about honesty. For the first time in 8 years, our family knows the truth, not your version, not Vanessa's spin. The truth. Vanessa tried once more. She was desperate to regain control of the narrative. This is ridiculous, she scoffed, though her voice wavered. You are acting like we are monsters. We are your family. Myra, families help each other. That is what families do. You are right, I said, turning to face her. Families do help each other. I took a step toward her. So where were you when I was pregnant and alone? I asked. She didn't answer. Where were you when I was raising newborns while studying for my board exams on 2 hours of sleep? Silence. Where were you when I was bleeding out in an ambulance and I needed someone to watch my children? She looked away. You were at a concert, I said softly. You were laughing. I looked back at my parents. From now on, I said, my voice ringing with finality, I won't be sending money. Not a penny. My mother gasped. Not because I can't afford it, I continued, but because financial support should be a gift, not an obligation, and it should flow both ways in a family that actually cares about each other. My mother reached toward me. Myra, please, how will we? I am also not cutting you off forever, I said. This surprised them. They looked up, a glimmer of hope in their eyes, but I crushed the hope quickly. But I need space, I said, real space, not a few weeks of guilt tripping followed by everything going back to normal. I need you to actually think about what you have done. I need you to look at those numbers in that folder and really ask yourselves how you let it happen. I took Lucas back from Aunt Eleanor. He felt heavy and solid in my arms, my reality. If someday you can acknowledge it, I said, If you can really acknowledge it without excuses, maybe we can rebuild something. I paused. But I won't hold my breath. I turned away from them. I walked back to Grandpa Thomas. He looked at me with pride, not the flashy pride of a parent showing off a trophy, but the deep, quiet pride of a man watching someone do the right thing when it was hard. A great aunt approached me. She was a woman I had always been intimidated by, stern and reserved. She took my hands in her weathered ones. I am so sorry, sweetheart, she said. I had no idea. All these years, I thought you were the one who had it easy. I thought you were the distant one. I know, I said softly. Everyone did. That is how it was supposed to look. I want to pause here and check in with you again. That moment, that specific moment when I finally said those words, I can't keep buying love that should have been free. It felt like my lungs opened up for the first time in a decade. I know so many of us, especially women, have been taught that family means sacrifice. We are taught to be the peacemakers, the fixers. But here is the thing, boundaries are not betrayal. Saying no is not selfish. If you have ever felt like you are buying affection, or if you have ever been the convenient one, please type boundaries in the comments. I want to see how many of us are breaking these chains. And if you know someone who needs to hear this story, someone who is still carrying the weight, please share this with them. You might just save them a decade of heartache. Now, let's see what happened in the aftermath. Because the party was just the explosion, the real change happens in the fallout. My parents left the party early. No one stopped them. No one asked them to stay. No one said goodbye. My father helped my mother to the car. She was sobbing into his shoulder, a broken figure. Vanessa followed them, her head down, clutching her purse, refusing to make eye contact with anyone. The silence they left behind was heavy, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was more like the quiet after a severe storm passes. The air felt cleaner. Grandpa Thomas put his hand on my shoulder. You did good, Meyer, he whispered. You did good. In the days that followed, the fallout was swift, and it was absolute. My phone buzzed constantly. But for the first time, it wasn't my parents asking for money. It was relatives, cousins I had barely spoken to in years. I always thought you were the difficult one. My cousin Rachel texted me. Vanessa made it sound like you pulled away for no reason. I am so sorry. I believed her. Another text from an aunt. We are so proud of you. If you need anything with the twins, call us. The family group chat, the one where I had received that devastating message, went silent. Then, about 3 days later, I saw a notification. Richard has left the group. Helen has left the group. Vanessa has left the group. Then, the group was deleted entirely. It was over. The mechanism they used to control the narrative was gone. But the most significant change wasn't the texts. It was the social calendar. My parents found themselves quietly, but firmly, excluded. When my cousin Michael had his 40th birthday 3 weeks later, my parents weren't invited. When Aunt Eleanor hosted Easter brunch, their names weren't on the list. No one made a formal announcement. No one declared sides. They simply stopped being welcome. The family had seen the ledger. They had seen the text message, and they had made their choice. My mother called me from a new number 2 weeks after the party. I stared at the phone. My thumb hovered over the answer button. Old habits die hard. The urge to fix it, to soothe her, to tell her it was okay, was strong. But then I looked at the scar on my abdomen. I remembered the fear in the ambulance. I let it go to voicemail. I listened to the message later. Myra, please, she said. Her voice was thick with tears. We need to talk. This has all been blown out of proportion. Your father is devastated. I am devastated. Can't we just move past this? Move past this. That was their strategy. Ignore it, bury it, pretend it didn't happen. I deleted the message. Forgiveness wasn't a reset button. I knew that now. Forgiveness is a release for me, not a permission slip for them. And I wasn't ready to release anything yet. But the financial consequences, those were just beginning. And they were about to hit my parents harder than any social snub. There is a hard lesson that life teaches us. Often when we are looking the other way, you can build a beautiful life. You can have the nice house, the country club membership, the designer clothes. You can paint a picture of success for the world to see. But if the foundation of that life is someone else's money, eventually, the house of cards will fall. And when it falls, it happens fast. 3 months after the party, the silence from my parents had turned into a permanent state of affairs. I hadn't blocked their emails, but I wasn't reading them either. I was busy healing. My body was getting stronger. The scar on my abdomen was fading from an angry red to a pale pink. I was sitting in my kitchen on a rainy Tuesday morning. The twins were at daycare. It was my day off. The house was quiet in that lovely, rare way that only mothers understand. My phone rang. It was Aunt Eleanor. "Are you sitting down?" she asked. "I am," I said, wrapping my hands round a warm mug of tea. "What happened? Is Grandpa okay?" "Grandpa is fine," she said. "He's actually in Bermuda right now." "But this is about your parents." I felt a small tightness in my chest. "What about them?" "They're selling the house," Eleanor said. I set my tea down. "What? The house?" she repeated. "They put it on the market last week. The sign went up yesterday." I stared out the window at the rain sliding down the glass. The house I grew up in, the house where I had studied for my SATs, the house where I had cried when I didn't get into the first choice college, and where my father had told me to be practical. "Why?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. "Because they can't pay the mortgage, Myra," Eleanor said bluntly. "They haven't paid it in 3 months. The bank sent a pre-foreclosure notice. They're trying to sell before the bank takes it." I should have felt something. I searched my heart for guilt. I searched for satisfaction. I searched for vindication. But I just felt tired. "It's only been 3 months," I whispered. "How could they be drowning so fast?" "Because they were never swimming." "Honey," Eleanor said softly, "you were holding them up. Dad took that early retirement at 55 because he knew he had you as a safety net. Mom never looked for work because she knew the Myra scholarship would always come through on the first of the month." I closed my eyes. It was one thing to see the numbers on a spreadsheet. It was another to see the physical dismantling of their life. "Where will they go?" I asked. "Your Uncle Frank is letting them stay in his guest house," Eleanor said. "Uncle Frank?" The one who had shaken his head in disgust at the party. "Temporarily," Eleanor added quickly. "Frank made it very clear. It is conditional. They have to pay for their own utilities. And they need to get jobs." "Jobs?" I asked. "Real jobs," she said. "Not consulting, not projects, jobs where you punch a clock." Frank told Richard that if he wants to live there, he needs to contribute. Dad is looking at hardware stores. Mom is looking at bookkeeping work. I let out a long breath. My parents were in their early 60s. They were healthy. They were capable. But they hadn't worked a real 40-hour week in years. "What about Vanessa?" I asked. "Can she help them?" She always acted like she had investors lining up. Eleanor laughed. It wasn't a kind laugh. It was a dry, cynical sound. "Vanessa has been drowning since the party," she said. Word got out. "Myra, what do you mean?" "The family talks," Eleanor said. "And some of our cousins work in the city. They know people in her industry." The story of the party. The story of the laughing emoji while her sister was dying. It spread. It turns out, people don't like doing business with someone who treats their own blood that way. She paused. "She lost her major design contract last week. The investors pulled out. Last I heard, she is waitressing part-time at a bistro downtown to make rent." I stared at the rain. "Vanessa. Waitressing, my father, working at a hardware store, my mother, answering phones, the Golden family, the successful Carvers. It had all been an illusion, a play they were putting on, and I was the one paying for the tickets." "I don't want them to suffer, Eleanor," I said quietly. "I really don't." "No, you don't," she said soothingly. "That is because you are a good person. Meyer, you have a good heart." Her voice turned firm. "But listen to me closely. They didn't suffer for 8 years because you were supporting them. But they also didn't grow. They didn't learn. They became children in adult bodies because you never let them fall." She waited for me to absorb that. "You stopping the money wasn't cruel," she said. "It was necessary. It was the only way they were ever going to learn how to stand on their own 2 feet." She was right. Deep down, I knew she was right. Enabling isn't love. It's just comfortable destruction. I hung up the phone and sat in the quiet kitchen for a long time. That evening, after I put Lily and Lucas to bed, I sat down at my desk. I opened my budget app. For 8 years, there had been a line item, family support, $3,200. It was the biggest expense in my life, bigger than my rent, bigger than my student loan payments. I looked at that number, $3,200 a month. I deleted the line item. Then I created a new one, Twins College Fund. I set up an automatic transfer, $3,200 every month. I watched the first transfer go through. I realized something profound in that moment. That money wasn't disappearing into a black hole anymore. It wasn't buying ungratefulness. It wasn't buying tailored suits for my father or concert tickets for my sister. It was buying freedom for my children. Lily and Lucas would never have to worry about student loans. They would never have to take a job they hated just to pay bills. And most importantly, they would never, ever have to carry the financial burden of their parents. I was breaking the cycle. I sat back in my chair and wept. Not out of sadness, but out of relief. The sheer, overwhelming relief of knowing that my children would have a different life than I did. I want to pause here. This is a heavy realization. It is easy to feel guilty when you see people you love struggling, especially when you know you could write a check and fix it. The savior complex is a hard thing to break. But I want to ask you, have you ever supported someone who refused to support themselves? Did you realize that by saving them, you were actually keeping them helpless? If you have been there, type "breaking the cycle" in the comments. It is a brave thing to do. And if you are enjoying this story of truth and redemption, please take a moment to like and subscribe. It helps more people find these stories. Now, back to the story. Because while the financial cord was cut, the emotional cord is much harder to sever. 6 months passed. My parents moved into the guest house. They sold the big colonial house for less than it was worth to pay off the bank. They lost their status. They lost their country club membership. I heard snippets of their life from Aunt Eleanor, but I never reached out. Then, one Tuesday night, 6 months after the party, my phone lit up. It was late. I was just turning off the lights downstairs. I looked at the screen. It was an unknown number. Normally, I would ignore it. But something, maybe intuition, maybe fate, made me answer. "Hello, Meyer." The voice was familiar, but it sounded wrong. It lacked the polish, the arrogance, the breezy confidence I had known my entire life. It was Vanessa. "Vanessa," I asked, my hand gripping the phone tighter. "Please don't hang up," she said quickly. Her voice cracked. "Please. I know I don't deserve your time. I know you hate me. I don't hate you." I said automatically, "You should," she said. She took a shaky breath. I need to say something. And if you hang up, I understand. But I need to say it." I sat down on the bottom step of my staircase. The house was dark. "I'm listening." I said, "I'm sorry," she whispered. It wasn't the defensive sorry from the party. It wasn't the "I'm sorry you're upset" non-apology she usually gave. It sounded raw. "I am so sorry for everything," she said. "For the way I treated you, for the things I said." She paused, and I heard her sniffle. "For laughing at that text message," she said. "When you were," her voice broke completely. "When you were dying, I laughed. I sent an emoji. What kind of person does that?" I look at myself in the mirror now, and I don't like what I see. I waited. I let her cry. "I didn't know," she continued, her voice gaining a little strength. about the money. Not all of it. I knew mom and dad were struggling, but I thought they were managing. I don't know what I thought. Did you ever ask? I said softly. Silence. Double quotes. No, she whispered. I didn't ask because I didn't want to know. I liked being the favorite, Myra. I liked that everything came easy for me. I liked that I was the star. She laughed bitterly. Nothing is easy anymore, she said. I heard about the contract. I said, yeah, she said. Turns out your reputation matters. Turns out you can't be ugly to people and expect them to buy your clothes. Funny how that works. We sat in silence for a moment, two sisters, separated by miles and a lifetime of hurt. I'm not asking for money, she said quickly, I swear, and I'm not asking for forgiveness, really. I wanted you to know that I see it now. What I was, what mom and dad did, I see all of it. I took a deep breath. Then start from there, I said. What? Start from there, I repeated. Stand on your own feet. Vanessa, be better. Not for me, for yourself. Yeah, she said. I'm trying. I'm really trying. Good. I said, can I call you again? Sometime? Not soon. But sometime. I thought about it. I thought about the laughing emoji. But I also thought about the broken voice on the other end of the line. Sometime, I said. Not now, but sometime. I hung up the phone. And for the first time in a year, I didn't feel anger. I felt something like hope. There is a strange thing that happens when you stop carrying a heavy load. At first, you feel light, almost dizzy. But then, you feel something else. You feel steady. You feel your feet on the ground. You realize that for the first time in your life, you can walk in a straight line because you aren't compensating for someone else's weight leaning on you. 6 months after that phone call with Vanessa, and exactly 1 year after the accident that changed everything, I stood in the middle of my new apartment. It wasn't a mansion. It wasn't the colonial estate my parents had lost. It was a 2-bedroom unit on the 2nd floor of a quiet building. It had a small balcony that overlooked a park. The kitchen was narrow, and the carpet was a beige color that had seen better days. But it was mine. I watched the sunset through the windows, painting the walls in shades of orange and violet. Every piece of furniture in that room I had bought. Every bill that arrived in the mailbox was for me or my children. There were no hidden costs. There were no panic texts demanding $2,000. There was just rent, utilities, and that beautiful, growing college fund. For the first time in 34 years, my life belonged to me. That Sunday, the apartment was quiet. Lily and Lucas were out. Grandpa Thomas had become a fixture in our lives over the past year. It was a development I hadn't seen coming. I had always known him as the stern federal judge, the man in the black robe who didn't tolerate nonsense. But retirement and the truth had softened him. Or maybe he had always been soft, and my parents had just kept me too far away to see it. Every Sunday at noon, his vintage sedan would pull up to the curb. He would walk up the stairs, a little slower each month, but with a smile that reached, his eyes ready for an adventure. He would ask the twins. They would scream with delight. He took them to the zoo. He took them to the science center. He took them for ice cream that I pretended I didn't know about, even though they always came home with sticky faces and sugar rushes. That afternoon, when he dropped them off, he lingered at the door. He watched Lucas try to show me a rock he had found, explaining with great seriousness that it was a dinosaur egg. Grandpa Thomas leaned against the doorframe. They are good kids, Myra, he said. They are wild. I laughed, wiping dirt off Lucas's cheek. They are happy, he corrected, and they are secure. You are raising them right. I stopped what I was doing. I looked up at him. You have to understand. I had spent my entire life waiting for my father to say those words. I had spent hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to buy that approval, and I never got it. And here was my grandfather, giving it to me for free, simply because he saw me. Thank you, Grandpa, I said. My voice was thick. I mean it, he said. I wasted a lot of time, Myra, missing out on you, missing out on them. I let your father's excuses keep me away. I won't make that mistake again. He squeezed my shoulder and walked down the stairs. I closed the door and leaned against it. I realized then that family ain't just about whose DNA you share. It is about who shows up. It is about who drives the car. It is about who tells you that you are doing a good job when you are tired. And Eleanor had also become a constant. She wasn't just the cool aunt anymore. She was a friend. We had dinner together twice a month. She helped me navigate the emotional aftermath of the party, of setting boundaries, of learning to prioritize myself. One evening, over a glass of wine on my balcony, she asked me a hard question. Do you miss them? She asked. She didn't have to specify who them was. I looked out at the streetlights flickering on. I miss the idea of them. I admitted. I miss having parents. I miss the fantasy that if I just call, my mom will answer and actually care about my day. I took a sip of wine. But do I miss the reality? I asked. Do I miss the anxiety every time the phone rings? Do I miss the pit in my stomach when I check my bank account? Do I miss feeling like an ATM machine with a pulse? I shook my head. No, I don't miss that. You know what I admire about you? Eleanor said. What? You didn't become bitter, she said. A lot of people would have, after what they did. The money, the abandonment in the ambulance. You had every right to turn into stone, Myra, you had every right to become hateful. I thought about that. What would be the point? I asked. Bitterness is just drinking poison and expecting someone else to get sick. If I stayed angry, I would still be carrying them. I would still be letting them control my emotions. I put the financial burden down. I had to put the emotional burden down, too. Eleanor smiled. You are wiser than your 34 years. I had to be, I said. I paid a high tuition for that wisdom. As for my parents, we hadn't spoken directly since the party, other than that one voicemail I deleted. But in a small town, or even a medium-sized family, news travels. I knew from whispers that they were still living in Uncle Frank's guest house. It wasn't a glamorous life. Uncle Frank was a man of his word. He charged them for electricity. He charged them for water, and he checked their pay stubs. My father, the man who used to boast about his consulting work while living off my residency salary, was now working at a local hardware store. He mixed paint. He stocked shelves. He wore a red vest with a pneumatic that said Richard. My mother was doing bookkeeping for a church 3 days a week. It was quiet work, humble work. They weren't thriving. They weren't going to fashion shows in Milan. They weren't hosting lavish parties, but they were surviving, and for the first time in a decade, they were doing it on their own dime. Some days, I wondered if they thought about me. I wondered if, when my father was mixing a can of eggshell white, he remembered the daughter who used to pay for the roof over his head. I wondered if, when my mother balanced the church ledgers, she remembered the $300,000 she had taken from her own child. Did they regret it? Or did they just regret getting caught? I didn't know the answer. And the beautiful thing was, I didn't need to know. I had spent 34 years centering my life around their feelings, their needs, their approval. Now, my center was different. My center was the 2 little children sleeping in the next room. My center was the grandfather who showed up on Sundays. My center was the piece of a quiet apartment where the phone didn't ring with demands. I want to ask you something before we move to the final chapters of this story. We talk a lot about biological family, the people we are born to. But there's another kind of family. Some people call it the logical family. Some call it the chosen family. Grandpa Thomas and Eleanor, they became my chosen family. They filled the empty spaces that my parents left behind. Have you found your chosen family? Have you found people who love you not because they have to, but because they want to? If you have, I want you to honor them. Type chosen family in the comments. Let's celebrate the people who stepped up when they didn't have to. Because here is the truth I learned the hard way. Love is not a transaction. It is not a reward for being useful. The people who really love you, They love you even when you have nothing to give but yourself. I didn't know what the future held for my relationship with my parents. Maybe someday they would truly change. Maybe someday they would reach out with genuine remorse, ready to rebuild. Something real. If that happened, I would consider it. But I wasn't waiting for it. I wasn't shaping my life around the hope of something that might never come. I was too busy living. But life, as it often does, had one more curveball to throw, one more test of my resolve, and it would come from the person I least expected. There is a frantic, primal instinct that lives deep inside every child, no matter how old they get. It is the instinct that screams when a parent is hurt, even if that parent has hurt you. Even if there's silence between you, when the call comes, your body reacts before your brain can catch up. It was November. The air had turned crisp, and the stores were already filling with Christmas decorations. The first holiday season I would be spending without my parents. I had been dreading it, wondering if the ghost of family obligation would haunt me when the calendar turned. I was at the hospital, finishing a rotation. I was in the cardiology wing, reviewing patient charts. My world was steady, rhythmic. Then, my pager buzzed. It wasn't a code blue. It was a text from Aunt Ellen Ward. It's your father. Chest pains. He's at General. They think it's a myocardial infarction. A heart attack. I stared at the screen. The irony was so sharp it almost drew blood. I was a cardiology resident. I spent my life saving hearts. And now, the heart of the man who had broken mine was failing. For a split second, the old Myra took over, the fixer. My brain started racing. I need to call the attending at General. I need to get his charts transferred. I need to make sure he has the best room. I need to check his insurance. Oh God, does he have insurance? If not, I need to cover the deductible. I was already reaching for my phone to call admissions, to pull strings, to open my wallet. Then I stopped. My hand hovered over the keypad. I remembered the ambulance. I remembered the text message. Figure it out yourself. I took a deep breath. I put the phone down. I wasn't his bank anymore. I wasn't his insurance policy. I was his daughter. And right now, I was an estranged daughter. I drove to General Hospital. I didn't speed. I didn't run red lights. I drove the speed limit. When I walked into the waiting room, it smelled like stale coffee and anxiety. I saw my mother first. She was sitting in a plastic chair, looking smaller than I had ever seen her. Her hair wasn't perfectly coiffed. She was wearing a coat that looked a few years old. She looked up and saw me. Myra. She breathed. She stood up, her hands shaking. You came. Is he stable? I asked. My voice was professional, clinical. It was the armor I needed. They think so, she stammered. They have him on monitors. It was terrifying, Myra. He just grabbed his chest and collapsed at the hardware store. She reached for my hand. Her grip was desperate. We don't know what to do, she whispered. The insurance from the hardware store. It's not good. The deductible is so high, and they're talking about a stent. Maybe bypass. We can't, Myra, we can't afford this. It was less than 2 minutes. That was how long it took. She wasn't asking how I was. She wasn't hugging me because she missed me. She was hugging me because she saw a lifeline. She saw a wallet walking through the door. In the past, I would have been marching to the billing department already. I would have been handing over my credit card, saying, "Don't worry, Mom, I've got it." I looked at her. I looked at the fear in her eyes, which was real. But I also looked at the entitlement beneath it, which was just as real. I can speak to the doctors, I said calmly. I can look at his charts and translate the medical jargon for you. I can help you understand what's happening. Her face fell. She was waiting for the end, and she asked, "And that is all I can do?" I said. She stared at me. "But the bill, they want a deposit." "Then you should talk to the hospital's financial aid department," I said. "They have payment plans. They have charity care applications." Charity. She spat the word out like it was poison. We are the Carvers, Myra. We don't do charity. You aren't the Carvers of the country club anymore, Mom, I said gently. And I am not the Carver Bank. I walked past her into the bay. My father was lying on the bed, hooked up to monitors. The steady beep 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 was the soundtrack of my professional life. He looked gray, old, vulnerable. When he saw me, his eyes filled with tears. Myra, he wheezed. Hi, Dad, I said. I stood at the foot of the bed. I didn't go to the side. I kept that physical distance. I knew you'd come, he said. A weak smile touched his lips. You're a good girl. You always were. I'm here to see the chart, Dad, I said. I picked up the clipboard. I scanned the vitals. Troponin levels were elevated, but not critical. EKG showed a blockage, but it looked manageable with a stent. He wasn't dying. He was scared. It's a blockage, I told him. They'll go in through the wrist. Put a stent in. You'll be out in 2 days. 2 days. He groaned. I'll miss shifts at the store. They don't pay sick leave. He looked at me pointedly. Things are tight, Myra, he said. The rent at Frank's. The car. I put the clipboard back. It sounds like you have some adjustments to make, I said. He blinked. Adjustments, Myra. I'm having a heart attack. I'm your father. I know, I said. And I love you. I hope you recover quickly. I stepped back. But Dad, when I was bleeding internally. You went to a concert. The room went silent. The beep 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 seemed to get louder. He flinched. He remembered. Of course he remembered. That was different. He whispered. We didn't know. You didn't ask, I corrected. I looked at both of them, my mother hovering in the doorway, my father in the bed. I can't save you from this, I said. I won't save you from this. You are going to have to figure out the insurance. You are going to have to figure out the rent. That is what adults do. You're cold. My mother hissed. You've become so cold. No, Mom, I said. I've just become healthy. There's a difference. I turned to leave. Wait, Dad called out. I stopped. Will you at least visit? He asked. His voice was small. It wasn't demanding anymore. It was pleading. I looked back. I saw a man who was realizing, perhaps for the first time, that his money was gone. His prestige was gone. And his control was gone. All he had left was the relationship. And he had damaged it almost beyond repair. I'll call, I said, on Sunday. I walked out of the emergency room. I walked past the billing desk. I didn't stop. I walked out into the cold November air. I sat in my car and I gripped the steering wheel. I waited for the guilt. I waited for the crushing weight of I should have done more. But it didn't come. Instead, I felt a strange sense of pride. Not arrogance, just the quiet knowledge that I had walked into the fire and I hadn't burned. I had faced the ultimate trigger, a parent's health crisis, and I had held my boundary. They would survive. The hospital would work out a payment plan. They would struggle, yes, but they would survive. And because I didn't save them, maybe, just maybe, they would finally learn that actions have consequences. I drove home to my children. I want to pause here. This is the hardest part. It is easy to hold a boundary when everyone is healthy and happy. It is incredibly hard to hold it when there's a crisis. We are wired to help. We are wired to save. But sometimes helping is just hurting in disguise. If I had paid that bill, I would have confirmed everything they believed, that I was a doormat, that my no didn't really mean no, and that they could treat me however they wanted as long as they had a crisis to leverage. Have you ever had to say no during a crisis? Have you ever had to let someone face their own consequences, even when it hurt you to watch? If you have, you know how much strength that takes. Type strength in the comments if you understand that struggle. And if you are finding value in this story, please subscribe. We have one final part left, the conclusion, and the unexpected piece that comes when you finally let go completely. Because the story didn't end in the hospital parking lot. It ended 1 year later, in a place I never expected to be. There is a fear that keeps us trapped in toxic cycles. It is the fear that if we step away, the people we love will crumble. We tell ourselves, If I don't help them, they won't make it. If I don't write the check, they will end up on the street. We convince ourselves that we are the only thing holding the sky up. But I want to tell you a secret that I learned in the year following my father's heart attack. The sky doesn't fall. It just changes color. My father survived his heart attack. He spent 3 days in the hospital. I visited him once more. Briefly, with the twins, I didn't bring my checkbook. I brought flowers from my garden. When he was discharged, the bill came. It was substantial. In the old days, that bill would have been my problem. I would have spent nights awake, calculating which of my own bills I could skip to pay theirs. But this time, it was their problem. And you know what happened? They figured it out. They didn't figure it out elegantly. There was no magic wand. My mother had to sit down with a financial counselor at the hospital. She had to fill out paperwork she had always considered beneath her. They set up a payment plan, $150 a month for the next 5 years. They sold their second car, the luxury sedan that my father loved. They bought a used, reliable hatchback. They cut their cable package. They stopped eating out. And they survived. Actually, they did more than survive. They became real. 6 months after the heart attack, we gathered for Thanksgiving at Aunt Eleanor's house. It was the first time the whole family had been together since Grandpa's birthday party. Nearly 2 years prior, I was nervous. I parked my car and took a moment to breathe. I looked at Lily and Lucas in the rearview mirror. They were 5 now, loud and happy and oblivious to the tension. We were going to eat turkey. Lucas yelled, "Turkey," Lily echoed. I walked up the path, holding a homemade pie. I wasn't the bank anymore. I was just a guest bringing dessert. When I walked in, the first thing I saw was my father. He looked different. He was thinner. His skin wasn't the flushed red of expensive wine and high blood pressure anymore. He looked tired, yes, but he also looked grounded. He was wearing a flannel shirt, not a suit. "Hi, Dad," I said. He turned. He hesitated for a moment, the ghost of our old dynamic flickering between us, and then he smiled. "Hi, Myra," he said. "Pie looks good." "Apple," I said. "Grandpa's favorite." We stood there for a moment. The silence wasn't hostile. It was just calm. "How is the store?" I asked. In the past, he would have scoffed. He would have complained about the customers, about the manager who was younger than him, about the indignity of manual labor. But this time, he nodded. "It's busy," he said. "People are getting ready for winter. I helped a young couple pick out paint for their nursery yesterday. Reminded me of when we painted your room." I blinked. He remembered that. "Yellow," he said softly. "You wanted bright yellow." "I did," I said. "It's good work," he said, looking at his hands. They were rougher now, calloused. "It keeps me moving. Doctor says that's good for the heart." I realized then that by cutting him off, I hadn't destroyed him. I had given him back his dignity. I had given him the chance to be useful again, instead of just being a dependent. My mother was in the kitchen helping Eleanor. That was new too. Usually, Mom sat on the couch with a glass of wine while the help-me and Eleanor cooked. But today, she was peeling potatoes. She looked up when I entered. "Myra," she said. Her voice was quiet. "The twins are getting so big. They are," I said. She didn't ask for money. She didn't complain about her budget. She just peeled the potatoes. And then there was Vanessa. She arrived late, but not fashionably late. She arrived late because she had been working a double shift at the bistro. She looked different. Too, the designer clothes were gone, replaced by jeans and a simple sweater. She looked exhausted. She had dark circles under her eyes. But when she saw me, she didn't fake a smile. She walked right up to me. "Hey," she said. "Hey," I said. "I brought wine," she said, holding up a bottle. "It's not the $100 stuff we used to drink, but it's decent. Employee discount." We laughed. It was a small, genuine sound. "I'll take it," I said. We sat down to dinner. Grandpa Thomas sat at the head of the table. He looked around at his fractured, healing family. He raised his glass. "To truth," he said. "To truth, We echoed. The dinner wasn't perfect. There were awkward pauses. There were topics we avoided. We didn't talk about the old house. We didn't talk about the Taylor Swift concert. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't sitting there wondering what they wanted from me. I looked at my father, eating the turkey he had paid for with his own wages. I looked at my sister, pouring wine she had bought with her own tips. I realized that the cruelty of my boundaries had actually been a gift. I had given them the gift of consequences. By refusing to save them, I had forced them to save themselves, and in doing so, they had become people I could actually stand to be around. They were humbler, they were quieter, they were more grateful for the small things. After dinner, while the twins were playing with Grandpa, Vanessa joined me on the porch. The air was cold, smelling of wood smoke and dried leaves. "I'm going back to school," she said suddenly. I looked at her. "Really?" "Yeah," she said. "Community college, business classes. I'm tired of waitressing, Myra." And I realized I don't know how to do anything. I knew how to spend money. I didn't know how to make it. She kicked at a dry leaf. "I want to open a small shop someday. A real one. Not a fantasy funded by you." She looked at me. "I never thanked you," she said. "For what?" "For stopping," she said. "If you hadn't cut us off, I would still be pretending. I would still be that awful girl who sent a laughing emoji." She shivered. "I hate that girl," she whispered. "She's gone," I said. "You're here now." I drove home that night with a feeling of profound lightness. My bank account was growing. My children were sleeping in the back seat, safe and secure. My relationship with my parents wasn't close. I didn't call them every day, and I certainly didn't rely on them for emotional support. But it was clean. It was no longer infected by the disease of financial dependency. I want to ask you a question, and I want you to be honest with yourself. Is there someone in your life you are protecting from their own consequences? Are you paying a bill, or telling a lie, or fixing a mess because you are afraid they can't handle it? Maybe they can't, but maybe, just maybe, your help is the only thing keeping them from finding out how strong they actually are. If you have realized that helping can sometimes be hurting, type consequences in the comments. It is a hard truth to swallow, but it is the medicine that cures the family dynamic. And please, if this story is speaking to you, take a moment to subscribe. We are approaching the end of our journey together. As I lay in bed that night, listening to the wind outside, I thought about the car accident. I thought about the pain. I thought about the moment I almost died. It was the worst thing that ever happened to me. But as I looked at the ceiling of the apartment that I owned, purchased with money I had saved, enjoying a peace I had fought for, I realized something else. That accident saved my life. It broke my body, yes, but it broke the spell. It woke me up. And now, 1 year later, I was finally, truly awake. But the story isn't quite over. There is one final chapter, because healing isn't just about fixing the relationships with others. It is about fixing the relationship with yourself. And the most important conversation I needed to have wasn't with my father, or my mother, or my sister. It was with the woman in the mirror. Welcome back to the final chapter of our story. If you have walked this entire road with me, from the bleeding in the ambulance to the confrontation at the party, through the silence and the boundaries and the slow, quiet healing, I want to thank you. We have talked a lot about my parents. We have talked about Vanessa. We have talked about the money, the betrayal, and the anger. But every story about family trauma eventually comes back to one place. It comes back to the person staring at you from the bathroom mirror. Because here is the hardest truth of all. It is much easier to be angry at the people who used you than it is to forgive yourself for letting them do it. A few weeks after that Thanksgiving dinner, on the 1-year anniversary of the day I cut financial ties, I found myself standing in front of a full-length mirror in my bedroom. The twins were asleep. The apartment was still. I lifted my shirt and looked at the scar on my abdomen. For a long time, I hated that scar. It was a jagged, pink line that ran down my stomach. It was ugly. It was a reminder of the worst night of my life. It was a reminder of the truck, the pain, and the text message that broke my heart. But that night, looking at it in the soft yellow light of the lamp, I didn't see ugliness, I saw a map. I traced the line with my finger. This scar, I realized, was the boundary line. It was the physical mark of the moment my life split into before and after. Before the scar, I was Myra the pleaser, Myra the checkbook, Myra the doormat. I was a woman who believed that if she just worked harder, if she just gave more, if she just sacrificed enough of her own blood and treasure, she would finally be worthy of love. I looked at my eyes in the reflection. They looked older than 35. They held a certain weight, but they were clear. I asked myself the question that had been haunting me for 8 years. Why did you do it, Myra? Why did you give them $360,000? And for the first time, I answered myself honestly that I didn't do it because I was generous. I didn't do it because I was a good daughter. I did it because I was terrified. I was terrified that if I stopped paying, they would stop loving me. I was terrified that without my utility, I was invisible. I was buying my seat at the table because I didn't believe I belonged there for free. I forgave that younger version of myself that night. I whispered it out loud to the empty room. I forgive you. I forgave her for being desperate. I forgave her for being blind. I forgave her for thinking she had to purchase her mother's affection. She was just a girl trying to survive a conditional love. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I walked into the living room and sat on the couch. On the coffee table was a photo album Grandpa Thomas had given me. It was filled with pictures of the last year. There was a picture of Lucas blowing out the candles on his 5th birthday cake. There was a picture of Lily wearing Grandpa's oversized fedora and laughing. There was a picture of Aunt Eleanor and me clinking wine glasses on the balcony. There was even a picture from Thanksgiving, our candid shot of Vanessa and me on the porch. We weren't hugging, we weren't best friends, but we were standing next to each other. Two women figuring out how to be adults without the crutch of our parents' dysfunction. That is what a real life looks like. It isn't perfect. It isn't a curated Facebook post with a caption about how blessed we are. It is messy. It has scars. It has budget spreadsheets and awkward silences. But it is real, and it is mine. My relationship with my parents is still a work in progress, and honestly, it always will be. We talk on the phone maybe once every 2 weeks. The conversations are polite. We talk about the weather. We talk about the kids. We talk about the hardware store. We don't talk about deep feelings. We don't say I love you effortlessly. That bridge was burned. And while we have built a small raft to ferry supplies back and forth, the bridge isn't coming back, and I am okay with that. I don't need them to be my everything anymore. I don't need their validation to know I am a good doctor, a good mother, and a good person. I have Marcus, who started as a colleague and has become, well, something more. We're taking it slow, but it is nice to be with someone who brings me coffee without expecting a check in return. I have Grandpa Thomas, who reminds me every Sunday that it is never too late to do the right thing. And I have my children. I look at Lily and Lucas, and I make a promise to them every single day. I promise them that they will never have to earn my love. I promise them that they will never have to pay for my mistakes. They are free, and because they are free, I am free. As we close this story, I want to leave you with one final thought, a quiet truth to carry with you. Many of us, especially those of us in the middle of our lives, are carrying heavy backpacks. We are carrying the expectations of our parents. We are carrying the needs of our children. We are carrying the guilt of not doing enough. We are tired. I want you to stop for a moment. I want you to take that backpack off just for a second. Put it on the floor. Look at what is inside. Are you carrying things that belong to you? Or are you carrying rocks that someone else put there? Are you carrying your father's financial irresponsibility? Are you carrying your sister's envy? Are you carrying your mother's conditional love? You don't have to carry it. You can put it down. You can say no. You can say I am done. It will be scary. The people who benefited from your silence will scream. They will call you selfish. They will call you crazy. They might even send you a text message telling you that you are a burden while you are lying in a hospital bed. Let them, because on the other side of that noise is silence. And in that silence, you will find yourself again. You are not a bank. You are not a doormat. You are not a nuisance. You are the protagonist of your own life. And it is time you started writing the script. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for letting me share my heart with you. It has been a healing journey for me to tell it. And I hope, in some small way, it has been a healing journey for you to hear it. If this story resonated with you, if you found a piece of your own truth in my words, please join our community. Subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment below. Tell me, what is one rock you are ready to take out of your backpack today? I read every single comment. I want to know you. I want to support you. We are in this together. Until the next video, take care of yourself. Be kind to yourself. And remember, you are worth more than what you can give. Goodbye for now.